Hello, neighbor. I'm Robert Burns, and welcome back once again to another edition of Sound Off Louisiana. I am so delighted once again to have the former Alcohol and Tobacco Control Commissioner, Murphy Painter, joining us for segment 3 of this fascinating interview. We're going to provide you with links to segments 1 and 2. If you're joining us for the first time, you're welcome to go back and look at them. We have reached the point that Mr. Painter gave us some excellent background material in the months leading up to him being summoned and terminated from his position as the commissioner, which took place on Friday, the 13th of August, 2010. So, floor is once again yours. I believe you can make it as fascinating as segment 2, so take it away.
The last thing I want to be is fascinating, Robert. But you know, be that as it may. We ended the last segment with my meeting with the governor and or the governor's office, and which would have been Stephen Waguespack, Elizabeth Murrell, and Mike Edmondson, the head of state police. Now later I found out that my deputy commissioner Brant Thompson, who was in the office next door while all that was going on, and I don't know if there was anybody else. I don't know whether the OIG was there or not at that particular time, but it would seem like that possibly he was. But anyway, I mean, again, from my wah-wah standpoint, I mean, here I am trying to hold my finger in a dike, and the water coming out more and more, and trying to maintain some sense of integrity and honesty in the office over there. I get called down there and basically told that an unknown law enforcement agency was investigating me for allegedly misuse of the state police computer system. And I'd been running, I was about 56, 57 years old then. I started working at the sheriff's office in Ascension Parish when I was 18 years old as a radio operator. I'd been running driver's license checks, criminal history backgrounds, and everything else that you have access to through a law enforcement database since October of 1971. Ooh. And I got these people in the governor's office that are telling me that I'm misusing the system, which I knew 1,000% that was a pile of poppycock. But anyway, so I'm forced to play the game. I mean, they put me out on the street. They went to my office. They took everything, took all my keys, everything from me, took my laptop computer, my keys to my automobile, all the paperwork and stuff that was in my car. They took my card to get in my office. They took my ID, my gun, everything that night at the governor's office there. Cell phone, and put me out on the street to go home. And I was a little confused about that, you know. Ironically, you see and hear things like that, you scratch your head and say it can't never happen. And everybody always said, well, you know, why didn't you protect yourself from that? Well, I mean, in all fairness, I had myself protected from the bottom up to me. Mm-hmm. I was an appointed official. I never expected anything to come from this way down, especially with the two governors that I'd worked for before General. All had the most integrity and word in the world. What they said made sense. You never had to scratch your head and try to figure out where in the hell they were coming from or whatever. Once you explained the law to them or how you had been enforcing the law or the policy, they understood and said you do it the right way. This new administration was a different animal. Yeah. A whole different animal. So all of a sudden now, I guess the definitions change of what's right and wrong. But anyway, so I'm out without a job, trying to figure out what the hell the next step is and whatever else along the line. Now, the record is very, very plain. I got three sheds full of documents and court records and all kind of stuff that's available. Everything is in a document somewhere or another. But I wasn't allowed my personal stuff in that office for 3 or 4 months after I was let go. And could get no answers from anybody or anything. The administrative assistant that I had, or the confidential assistant that I had, that was mixed up in the middle of all this. First thing I did, because, well, let me try to get this in an order. The next thing that happened was, that was on the 13th. Well, on the 17th and the 18th, the news media is burning up with a copy of an affidavit for a search warrant, narrative, copy of the search warrant, and the return to search, where now it comes out that the law enforcement agency that is investigating me for all these matters is Inspector General Stephen Street, Greg Faries, and Shane Evans in that office, that they are investigating me. Now, again, I've been around the road a bunch of times. The state police is allegedly in charge of the computer database system for the state. The FBI is in charge of their database system that the state has access to, or law enforcement people have access to. The alleged, supposedly now all of a sudden, the word stalking shows up in the scenario, and stalking is a sheriff's office or a city police issue to investigate if it's a crime. Which if that was taking place, that's where you go make a complaint. You don't go make a complaint with the Inspector General's office, allegedly. But anyway, so all this is floating around, and the search warrant becomes the big deal. Because before that, I mean, I went on TV, and during all this time, I said from the get-go that I hadn't done anything wrong, criminally wrong, or whatever wrong you want to say, to be adjudicated or treated any kind of way like I was treated. But anyway, so let's talk about the search warrant, and and I want the law enforcement people out there, the lawyers out there, to be sure and listen very, very close of what I'm telling you, because this has only come out in a small context in 11 years of what I've been going through. And now, with all the stuff that everybody's seeing with the Ronald Green case, where people of authority and people that you're supposed to trust and believe have been fabricating something to cover that situation so badly that maybe somebody might accidentally believe or see what happened here. Now, nobody lost their life on this deal, and God forbid that somebody did in that other situation. And I'm sure, and everybody's innocent until proven guilty, and believe me, I have that tattooed everywhere on me, that you're innocent until proven guilty. That's something that we've done away with here lately. Yeah. Everybody allegedly now is all guilty until you prove yourself innocent. But anyway, so, and I'm sorry, I'm gonna name names here.
Sure.
and let it fall where it falls. But the lead investigator, or the guy running the show, putting his name on everything, is Shane Evans,
All right.
who was an investigator with the OIG's office. Now, on the 16th of August, 3 days after I was let go, they go to Judge Bonnie Jackson, who has no onus here whatsoever. No onus. Top of the line, top flight, whatever. But they present her with an application to a search warrant and make her believe, which is arguable, that they have the authority as a law enforcement agency to get an affidavit for a search warrant. Now, I'll argue that. They want to argue, let's argue. I mean, wonderful, you know. They have, I do not believe that they have any authority as a law enforcement agency to get a search warrant. But they did. Now, the other thing that everybody needs to understand is the way that that agency is set up by statute. They cannot talk or disclose anything in an investigation until it's over with and the governor has signed off on the investigation.
Correct.
Which most of the time is 6, 8, 10 months, might even be a year later. Okay? But for what, and another thing, the investigation that I've been able to do, I believe this is the first search warrant that they ever tried to get. Now they've got some after this, a few more, but I cannot find any search warrant that they ever applied for before this search warrant. Now, they've only had their so-called law enforcement power for less than a year and a half.
That's right.
That the testimony in the legislature that they gave in order to get some bifurcated or hold-your-nose law enforcement authority was that they needed that law enforcement authority so that they could legally have access to the state police criminal databases and the FBI criminal databases through the state police for their investigations. Ironic, oh my God. So now the search warrant, in the search warrant, Shane Evans recapitulates the confidential assistance allegations that had been put forth, that had already been investigated twice by the Department of Revenue. Twice. Except he adds the word stalking. He adds the word stalking. And now there's all kind of stuff here. But let's just she provided a statement indicating that she had been stalked and harassed by Painter during and after her employment at the ATC.
Wow.
A statement. She provided a statement indicating all this BS in here and saying that they need this search warrant to go get all the stuff in my office, that they want my laptop computer, they want my cell phone, they want any electronical stuff that I have, any access to my databases on the records and all that stuff, and they want my desktop computer, cell phone. I said all that. That's what this application for search warrant to this judge that is signed in an affidavit, which means that that law enforcement person or that person is swearing for it to be true. Swearing under oath that is true. Now, I know I'm gonna get a little emotional about this a little bit, and I'm gonna try to stay as calm as I can. But, and you know, people say I boast a little bit or whatever else, but I've been in this business 50 years. 50 years. I worked on every level of law enforcement that they have. I had credentials to work out of the FBI office in New Orleans as a deputy U.S. Marshal on a task force for insurance fraud. I worked out of there 4 years. I've been checked and rechecked over and over and over again. And now I've also been accused of a lot of things over and over again in my life. And I can only attribute that to the fact that I've always wanted to do the right thing when other people didn't think it was the right thing to do at that time because it didn't benefit somebody that they wanted to benefit. But all those things always sustained itself before it worked out. We got an application for a search warrant here where these Shane Evans, and he's not doing this by himself. There's no way in hell that the Inspector General, Stephen Street, isn't approving everything that's on this piece of paper before it went out, or that Greg Faries, who's their director or head of enforcement, is not, and a law enforcement officer, former law enforcement officer, doesn't know or know what the hell's going on here. He's not doing this by himself. So here is the backdrop of the problem with this deal. Everything that they asking for in this search warrant, I find out, well, I know some of it, but it takes me 2 years or 2.5 years, because it took them 2 years to indict me before I got access to the stuff that they took from me, or got access to the emails and the stuff from ATC and revenue and stuff along that line. So for 2.5 years, I'm still in the dark. All I know is this. I know that they had my cell phone, they had my laptop computer, they had my car, they had already that night gone to my office and searched my office. Now, whether they took anything or not, it don't matter. They searched my office that night, and in all fairness, guess what? They had every right in the world to do that. That's all state property.
State property, mm-hmm.
I didn't have no access to it, or no deal of privacy in any of that situation, and never claimed any privacy in any of it. That was what I was going to use. Those were the things I was going to use to save myself. I had all the stuff documented that I needed to prove what the hell I needed to prove. So Stephen Street himself, Shane Evans, and others went to my office after they put me out of the governor's office, and went into my office and rummaged and saw what was there, and I'm trying to make this be the right emphasis. Now, I don't have a clue. The only thing that wasn't on this search warrant that they didn't have was my desktop computer.
Okay.
The warrants is asking for my desktop computer, and I had no idea that it wasn't still in my office on the 17th whenever the search warrant took place. But I know damn well everything else they're asking for ain't in my office, that it's already been taken and it's already somewhere else. 2.5 years later, when I finally get access through Discovery, I go through 75,000 plus emails from about 10 different people, daylight to dark, way into the night, 75,000 emails over and over and over and over. Well, I find, now I'm indicted already now. They're trying to send me to prison.
Federal prison.
I find here where Trevor McDonald, who happens to be the TAC officer over the databases, sending an email August the 13th, 9:39 p.m. to Brant Thompson, who's now been appointed to take my place. Now he was taken away from duty. Nobody ever asked me what position he was in the office. He's taken my place that night. He's been appointed. Copying Lewis Thompson, Stacy Roberts, and Larry Hingle. And basically it goes through, they've changed my password so I can't get into my system anymore. That lieutenant that was at the Capitol or whatever is now in possession of my unit, state-issued weapon, and key card. Now, he's also in possession of my cell phone, my laptop, and everything else that I left at the Capitol when I left over there. And the vehicle and the other items will be housed at a secure location within state police.
Okay.
Here's the kicker. This is the night I was let go now.
Okay.
Not the 17th. Shane Evans with the IG's office has possession of Murphy's desktop computer that was in his office, and the door has been secured with evidence tape.
So you got the proof that they had it already.
Well, it come out in court. I mean, it come out in court.
Yeah, I know.
The point I'm trying to make is, to anybody that knows anything about any kind of system in the world, how in the hell can you fabricate a search warrant for stuff that you already have and then go act like you executing it, and then you file with the court another affidavit where you testified that you picked all of that up in that search warrant? Now again, the bizarre part about the whole deal is they had all that. They didn't need a search warrant. They didn't need a search warrant to look into it. They didn't need a search warrant to get any evidence off of it. They didn't need a search warrant for none of that. They only needed a search warrant so they could file this freaking false affidavit. File this false affidavit and file it in public without it being sealed, which was directly against their law that's there. So that the news media would spend the next year and a half telling everybody that I'm a stalker and I'm a all kind of bad person.
And they did.
Because of this BS. Now, again, I stood up all this time and told everybody that this was all BS, that it was all lack of a better word, a frame job, if you want to call it a frame job. Kelly Swear filed a civil suit against me, which was also false, that I said was false from the get-go. The state, after I fired the attorneys that were representing me in that case and took the case over myself and started trying to get the information that was needed to prove that it was false, within a week and a half of that taking place, whatever reason, risk management jumps up and decides to give her $100,000 or close to $100,000, and to quote her lawyer that was in the meeting, she needs $100,000 to get out of town. Because they wanted me to have a restraining order against me. And they also wanted me to sign a piece of paper saying that I would not sue her. And I refused. Without lawyers, there had 16 people in the room, probably 12 of them were lawyers. or people that knew better. But anyway, so I refused. So they gave her the money, she left. So shortly thereafter, I filed suit against her. I filed suit against the OIG, and I filed suit against Governor Jindal. August that year, I filed those suits. They had been having all their stuff for a year, had an opportunity to do, accuse me for whatever they want to accuse me of, and I filed suit against them.
You filed suit in 2011, correct?
In 2011, that's right,
Okay.
2011, within a year period of prescription
Right.
of the deal. And I pretty much made up my mind to let all that flow whatever way it was going to flow, let the lawyers handle it whatever else. And then I'd decided that I was going to apply for a private investigator license because my life was ruined.
Yeah.
I mean, I couldn't get a job with the state because the OIG had pronounced me guilty.
Yes.
The OIG said I was guilty of something. And that continued. And it's still continuing today, 11 years later, after being found not guilty, going through a court deal. But let's don't jump to the court deal yet. That's a whole nother deal.
Yes. Well, I may just to get to
But anyway,
reserve it.
so here we are. I filed suit against them. There was nobody investigating me. State police wouldn't investigate me for violating any state police rules and policy that had to do with database checks. The FBI, within a week of me getting fired, I went straight to the FBI office and sat with them and laid everything out to them that was going on. The FBI wasn't investigating me. They didn't want nothing to do with this stinky deal. Nothing to do with it. No other legitimate law enforcement agency was investigating me. They issued their report, which was false, in February of 2011. I have no recourse to that other than to file suit and to prove, which I could prove and still can prove beyond any doubt to anybody in the world other than somebody that's on their side or somebody that's been told what to do, that all this was nothing but poppycock. So let the suit go and see what happens. And we can talk about in the next session or whatever else. We can talk about my process of going through trying to get a private investigator license. Well, let me set that up too. So I filed suit in August. The first group ever to investigate me on this so-called horrible stuff that I've done. The end of September, the U.S. Attorney's Office issues a subpoena to the ATC for documents for me. Now, I've already filed suit against the Inspector General's office. I got all that in line. I don't know all this is going on till 2 or 3 years later when I finally get access to the timeline of how it all happened. But just remember, nobody was investigating me for this. The only person investigating me was the Inspector General's office, and the only people, once I filed suit against them and Governor Jindal, now all of a sudden the U.S. Attorney's Office is issuing a subpoena for my records. Now, before we go any further, during all this time that all this is going on, every time they would come out with something in the news media, I would do what I can or what I could, because I'm representing myself now. I don't have a lawyer. I didn't need a lawyer. I went and talked to a couple of lawyers. Both of them told me that this is ridiculous. there's no way in hell that you've done anything criminally wrong or whatever else, and that they just messing with you for politics or whatever else. Let it go, whatever, it's going to go by its wayside. But anyway, so OIG's office is accusing me, first, of not having proper access to the computer systems, databases, and that I ran too many. I was the head of the agency, so I had no reason to run any. Now, they don't have a clue what went on in ATC, and that I'm hands-on, and that I'm at 300 a month that I'm going through, that I've got my computer, and I'm catching all the flaws that are going on, all the schemes that are going on by using this database, which the law gives me full right to do. But anyway, that so-called, I ran too many database checks. Let's see where that is here. Put my hand on it.
Take your time.
Right. Quick. Okay. I've been commissioner of ATC since 1996. From 1996 to 2006, maybe 2004, 2005, because we had moved from the state police to the Department of Revenue, which is a whole nother story. But anyway, in 1995, but in order to maintain the provisions necessary to issue a valid license, we kept a connection to the state police database and the FBI database through that connection, through a connection to the Department of Labor that was totally sanctioned and totally approved by everybody in the world. Nobody was arguing that. So from 96 to 2004, we were doing our checks that way. Now, ironically, I'd made some pretty good discoveries and had run some, or had forced to let some people go in the office because of them having affidavits coming through and saying, I ran this guy through the computer and he's okay. And then when I run him through the computer, he's got a full-page rap sheet. He done killed 20 people and went to jail, prison, and everything else. And they sitting here trying to give him an alcohol license in a bad part of town or whatever else. So I was real diligent about that. That record is completely clear. And I'd been twice before this, like in 2003, 2005, people in my office had already filed the same complaint with the Inspector General's office that I was using the database for licensing purposes and didn't have authority to use it for licensing purposes. And that's a whole nother long story about how that's BS. But anyway, it's plain as day that we have the authority to use it to sanction or look at licensing to see whether somebody qualifies or not. Irrefutable. So anyway, so I've been through 2 OIG's investigations on that already, and with obviously a different result in this one. But anyway, so I do a Freedom of Information request to the OIG's office, being they got this new power now that they got at the legislature, that they have access to the same databases that they're accusing me of abusing. Now, you can go figure out how many complaints they had or how many reasons you think the OIG has to use those complaints or not. But let's look at the investigative totals. Now, I'm issuing, or from 96 to 2010, I've issued over 700,000 responsible vendor permits to different people, 13,000 regular licenses, another 15,000 special events every year. So there's probably millions of reasons that I could have to use the computer for a process. And it started out that I used it 2,000 times, and then that went down to 1,300, and then that went down to 700 before it was over with. So that kept changing as it went along. Well, let's deal with the 700. So 700. Well, I asked them to give me the totals. I don't want to know who they ran because that's private. Now, that's another thing. Everything on that state police and FBI database is confidential. The first thing the OIG does is release everybody that I ran or that was ran, because some of them I didn't run that they accused me of. There was ones on there that I did run that happened to be edited off the list.
Yeah.
That's a whole nother story. But they put that confidential information out to everybody that's out there. So I know they're not going to give me who they ran, but I want to know the numbers. So, okay, they had only had this deal for a year, supposedly. Look at these investigators. I won't tell you but one name or so, but anyway. One investigator 18 times, another investigator who, again, was one of the investigators, Tom Bolton, that accused me of everything. He ran 353 checks in that short period of time. Spencer Dealworth, 762. Shane Evans, the guy that's accusing me, ran 2,179 checks during that period of time. Ernest Green, who used to work for ATC, 88. Larry Hayes, 0. Miss McCrae, 62. Greg Farry, 0. And Tracy Richard, 533. Now, how does that compare with what I'm being accused with? So, I mean, I'm giving all this to them, trying to give them the opportunity to see that how ridiculous it is for them to be accusing me of doing something with the computer system. The next thing I provided, and this September 2012, well, this was a little bit later, but to try to give the audience an understanding of how bizarre all this is. At that time, there was 18,000 law enforcement officers in the state of Louisiana. Not all of them have access to the computer system, but let's just say they all do. Okay. Here are the years and everything from 2006 to 2010, which is what they're accusing me of abusing. In the year 2010, when they accused me of running too many checks, there was a total. Now there's only 4.5 million people in the state of Louisiana at this time. And state police, police ain't the only one that have access to this information. Insurance agents have access to it. All lawyers, if they want to pay for it, have access to it. The Department of Labor has access to it. I believe Health and Human Services have access to background information, but that's not listed on this number. 2010, 45 million checks were done in 2010.
10 for every man, woman, and child in the state. 10
for every man, woman, and child, or close to 3,000 for every law enforcement officer in the state. Yet I ran 733, they claim, when it got down to the end, over almost a 10-year period from over a 10-year, from 1996 to, or from 2005 to 2010, and I've done something so horribly wrong that I'm supposed to go to prison for it. So I just wanted to end this session on those two things to show how bizarre search warrant, reality, how bizarre all this is.
Very good. Well, I want to thank you once again. As I said in the previous segment, I don't care if it takes 12, 15, 20 segments. I want you to get your full side of the story out there, and I believe there are going to be people that, through the first 3 segments, I know we've got attention, and I plan on giving you the floor for as long as you need it, Mr. Painter, so.
Well, I hate that it has to come to this, but I mean, I have to do what I have to do. That's all I can say.
I understand perfectly. Folks, we want to thank everyone who's tuned in, and we want to invite you to join us again for segment 4. Thank you so much.